Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Velocity Portfolio. My name is Rob, and I want to do something a little bit different in this video. Normally I do a weekly update at the end of the week, but on Tuesdays I wanted to implement a little bit more insight into my thought process and the portfolio and decisions and things like that. So in this video I actually want to cover some of my thought process since I've begun living out of the brokerage account and just some of the things that I've answered and surprises and things like that. So I have some talking points just to keep me on track, and I'm going to try not to ramble too much. But real quick before I jump into that, just a quick update for any new viewers on what we are doing with this channel. So this is my brokerage account, traditional brokerage account. I call it Velocity Portfolio, where I am investing all of my income. So when I earn a W-2 check from my job, or my wife does, or any kind of side gig income, I do not deposit it into a bank account. It goes into this brokerage account. And then with the money that I deposit, say it's $2,000 on any given Friday or any given day, I purchase these three categories of either stocks or ETFs or funds. And then those pay dividends, and eventually those dividends pay down my margin balance when they come in. And then all of my monthly expenses are paid with margin. So money goes in that is earned into the brokerage account. I make purchases of assets in these categories, and then I pull money from the account and borrow it on margin to pay expenses, say $150 for a water bill or something like that. I pull it from the account, transfer it, or just pay the bill directly, and that pulls on margin. So I'm now borrowing that $150. So I have a current margin balance. It's actually just a little shy of $30,000 right now. And then when I receive dividends from these funds, those dividends pay down the margin balance. And the dividends continue to grow month over month, so that the amount of money that I need to pull or borrow on margin is less and less. So the margin balance increases slower as time goes on. So these increase, and then the amount I'm pulling every month on margin decreases, and eventually they cross, and the dividends will cover all of my monthly expenses. And at that point, I'll have the option to not work any longer. So jumping into kind of some talking points here. I know it's not real visual here, but let me make this a little bit bigger. I wanted to kind of speak freely a little bit. I didn't want to have everything like totally scripted, but these were some talking points that I wanted to cover as far as living out of the brokerage. So I started fully living out of my brokerage in October of 2025. And so far the account has grown about $60,000 or $70,000. I was using this account to trade a little bit, day trade a little bit before. I was selling options. I was doing all kinds of different things with it, trying to find ways to not only increase income, but also to increase the velocity of this account faster, so that I could eventually get out of the rat race quicker. Even in my mid-20s, I just never really wanted to settle with working for 40, 50 years and then, retiring and then hopefully not dying in 5 years. I've mentioned in a previous video, just lost my father-in-law. He was retired for 5 years and he passed away. And that's really sad. So, and I've seen that happen with a number of people where they retire and then a few years later they're no longer here. So I'm trying to not do that. And I have a 9-month-old daughter now, my first child. I'm trying to spend more time with her and, with my wife. And we've decided that we want to have a second child at some point. So this is all just fuel for the fire that I'm trying to do here. And I think I've truly found it with living out of the brokerage account here. But I wanted to give kind of my insight and feelings on some of the things that have happened since I've started living out of the brokerage a little over 3 months ago now. So the first thing was, or is, why I thought living off investments would feel one way. I thought when I started this process that I would be penny pinching more. I am inherently kind of cheap and very, very frugal, borderline cheap on a lot of things. I will spend money on things that I do enjoy, like hobbies and things like that, but I cut frivolously in other things. As I've learned from a book, I'm sure people have read the book. I don't even remember which book it's from, but it says spend mercilessly on things you enjoy and cut frivolously on things you don't. And I'm paraphrasing that, and I might even have it wrong, but the point is spend on the things you enjoy and don't spend on the things you don't. So for instance, I don't really enjoy clothes. They just don't do anything for me. So, I know people like shoes and nice designer shirts and things like that. It does absolutely nothing for me. I get I get crap all the time from my family that I wear the same things, and I've been wearing the same things for 10 years. I graduated college 13 years ago now, and I still have shirts that I wear from back then, and they're in good condition. They don't have holes. I mean, I don't look like a total scrub, but I definitely won't get rid of it if I don't need to or don't have to. So, but I'll spend money on other things like hobbies and things like that. So I thought that because I have that mindset already from growing up poor, I thought the penny pinching would get worse when I moved to this strategy. And it's actually not. I thought it would make me suddenly aware of every dollar, and it's actually done the opposite. So prior to this, in the last 5 years, I was using an app called YNAB where you need a budget. It's an envelope system. So in like a physical sense, you take an envelope and you write groceries on it, or let's say eating out or fast food, right? And you make $200. You're going to spend $200 on that, and you would physically take two $100 bills or $200 in total and put it in that envelope, and that's what you get to spend that month. And that's what you did in this app is you create these categories. So I was doing that for the last 5 years, and it worked great for me. It really helped me get my spending under control because I was not the greatest with money in my 20s. I'm now almost 40. And it helped me get on track with that, but it did kind of create a scarcity mindset where if I went over that $200 that I put in that envelope for eating out that month, I was stressed on it, and it actually ended up. Now that I found this strategy, I've learned about myself that it actually created more stress and anxiety than it was helping, and it did help a lot in the beginning. But moving to this strategy has really changed that. Like I said, I thought it would make that worse, but it's actually made it better. And on the other side of this is your budgeting. It's got to be under control with this strategy. You cannot spend more than you are depositing into this account because it's eventually just going to backfire. Your margin equity is going to drop quicker. Your margin balance is going to rise quicker, and you won't be able to sustain it for very long. So you have to have your expenses under control. But in a way, it's given me more freedom, and I'm not penny pinching down to the penny, if that makes sense. So it's kind of had the reverse effect on me, which is really nice. Hopefully, I'm trying to articulate this as best I can. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. The second thing here, what has actually surprised me about switching over to this strategy, I think the biggest thing is I'm not really concerned about beating the market. I know that's what everybody wants and should want. And Warren Buffett just retired, and he had a tremendous track record for just completely beating the market for so many years. And that should be everybody's goal in general. But in this particular strategy, I'm not concerned about beating the market. And the reason why is because when you're trying to beat the market, you're usually trying to beat it over a longer period of time. And when I say longer period of time, I'm thinking like traditional period of time of like 30, 40 years when you're going to retire, because it has it's more drastic in that sense. Beating the market for 20, 30, 40 years has a lot more impact than doing it for just 5 to 7 years. And that's not to say that, you could make more money in the short term in 5 to 7 years by beating the market. Of course you can. But my strategy or thought process for beating the market isn't really existent. In the short term, I know that as long as I'm depositing my income, all of my income, assuming I don't lose a job or anything like that, into this account, and I control my expenses and make sure they are lower and as low as possible, I'm going to win in probably 7 to 10 years at most. Now, of course, if the market takes a downturn, things like that, that could change. But I'll cross that bridge when it comes, and I'll maintain a comfortable equity percentage, and I'll have consistent income coming in. And as long as I'm doing that, then I'm not really concerned about beating the market. And also another thing that goes into that is the concept of enough. I'm not trying to have as much money as possible. In 10 years, I don't know what the number is. It's going to depend where I'm at in that point in time, but I'm not trying to just make as much money as possible. I'm just trying to get to that number, whatever that number ends up being. Like right now, it's about like $1 million in portfolio value. Once I get to that number, then my expenses are covered. And I don't need to have 10, 15, $20 million in the bank to be happy. I just want to have enough to live the life I want to live, which is not too crazy. Now, that's going to be a totally different situation for somebody other than me, right? So you have to really like deep dive and think about what it is that you want with that, and make some decisions based on that too. So that's number two. I'm going to cover some more of this in six. I don't want to get down too much on that. So number three, what was harder than expected? So I remember reading a book, and I want to say again, I'm really good at reading books, but I can't remember what book it was or where it came from. But I read a book that I want to say it was MJ DeMarco and the Millionaire Fastlane. It's about starting businesses and things like that. But I read this in a book that, in order to, I'm paraphrasing, of course, to achieve like high earnings and high results, you have to think in big numbers. You can't think about making $1 million when you're worried about $100 essentially. And I understand that, and it kind of resonated with me. And another quote that I've read in a book is, if you want to make millions, you got to impact millions. If you want to make thousands, you got to impact thousands. But still, even with all that being said, and all the books that I've read and podcasts and everything I've listened to, what has been harder than anything for me is watching my margin balance grow. So I started this in October of this last year, so just barely over 3 months. And my margin balance, sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit here. My margin balance is sitting close to $30,000. And that's a lot of money. I have my personal student loan is less than that right now. We're not up to my wife's student loan balance yet, but we're getting close to it. And I think the only thing that's kind of, not the only thing, but one of the main things that's helping me kind of grasp the concept of the margin balance growing right now is that I have a mortgage. So when I look at my mortgage balance, which is over $600,000 that I owe on my home still, that margin balance looks like nothing. But still, $30,000. I mean, that's a car, almost a brand new car, or a brand new car in some cases. So it is a lot, and you have to think that if you, like, my goal is to never drop below 60% margin equity. And if I have $1 million portfolio, when I hit that mark, if I'm sitting around that 60%, that's $600,000 that I have in margin balance. So it's a little bit hard to see that number grow. And every time I pay my mortgage and a very large bill, it's not really the $100 here or the $200 there that really impacts me. It's when I pay like my mortgage, or I had to pay property taxes or something like that, like a larger number. And then the next day I log in and I see that margin balance grow. It's always a little bit kind of shocking at first. So you have to learn to deal with that a little bit. And with that, I would really recommend starting very slow if you're going to do this. Starting very slow until you really feel comfortable. It's probably the best advice I can give as far as if you wanted to start this process. With that, what has been easier than expected is making better financial decisions. Sorry, losing my voice. So making better financial decisions. Again, I thought this would be a situation where it would make me penny pinch more and make me like even more frugal, and that hasn't been the case. I think in a way it's made me better with my financial decisions because I'm now concerned about the equity of my portfolio. I want to make sure that I'm not drawing too much out of the account, that my margin balance is growing faster than it should. It's really, really important actually now, because there's just more on the line, right? Before, you get $1 and you just spend it and you don't really have to think about it. As long as your bills are paid, you have a surplus at the end of the month, you're not dipping into savings. Assuming you have a savings, then you're good, right? That's what most people think. You're putting a little bit into retirement and you're good. Some people are more aggressive, some people are less aggressive, but for the most part, you're in a good spot. Better than most, at least. But it has made me really, really hone in on limiting my expenses as much as possible, but kind of in a healthy way. So it's not making me penny pinch so much anymore. It's more about just making sure I'm over or under. And it's being okay with, if I had $200 in that eating out envelope or budget, it's being okay with going over a little bit, because I know that it's not going to affect it that much in the long term. But, if you're spending more than you're bringing in, then it's going to go the opposite direction. So it's actually been a little bit easier for me to make better financial decisions by switching over to this. And, good segue into how it changed my relationship with money. And I did a whole video on this, or half a video on this, about how it's changed my relationship with money and made me more confident. And again, the concept of enough has built confidence. We're chasing this big number, and now with this strategy, I can hit that big number within 5 to 7 years, maybe a little bit longer. So it's made me more confident that I can kind of live life right now. And as I mentioned in that previous video, I can now give more back, and that's what I've been doing. And just being more generous, making better choices as far as like what I want to spend money on. Is it going to make me happy right now? Something as simple as like going and getting a $150 massage that I would never do in the past. But it's changed that. It's made me more confident, because I know that the number, or the round number, is more achievable in the next like 7 to 10 years rather than 40 years. So at most, I might be like 50 years old or pushing 50. And that's encouraging to me, assuming, my health stays in the way it is right now and everything like that, which, I do the things daily to make sure that's the case. Eating right and taking vitamins and strength training and getting steps in, all that good stuff. I do all of that. So health is a big part of that. But it has definitely made me more confident. So, and last but not least, I wanted to kind of just talk about the things that most people on YouTube and other social media outlets, I don't feel like really talk about enough. And that's kind of like the downfalls, right? So this is a risky strategy. It can be a risky strategy. And I'm not here to give anybody advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Take all of this with a grain of salt. I'm not any of that. I'm just a guy who has very limited experience, not the brightest crayon in the box. But I think I found something that is doable for me and sustainable. And I'm pretty happy with the progress of 3 months in. That being said, if you're spending more than you're bringing in, the strategy probably isn't going to work for you, or at least it won't for very long. If you're not used to like bigger numbers, like I referenced a little bit ago with the margin balance growing, it's going to be really tough for you mentally, seeing that number grow, and every time you have to pull money, it's going to stress you out. If you're the type that has to watch the market every single day and you're like really stressed out about the ebbs and flows of the market, this is going to be a tough strategy for you. It gets to a point too where you have to manage your equity. You're no longer just depositing money and then investing all that money. So you deposit $2,000, you buy $2,000 worth of assets. That eventually that's not the case. And this may not for some people, it may never get to this point, but as the margin equity drops because you're pulling money to pay bills, and you get closer to that 50, 55, 60% margin equity percentage that you have in your head that you want to stick to, minus 60%, some people's 50s, it gets tougher to deal with that. So you're no longer maybe putting $2,000 in and then buying $2,000 worth of assets. You're now maybe putting $2,000 in and only buying $500. So the process starts to slow down. So seeing those numbers slow down might affect you. The ebbs and flows of the market might affect you and make you make decisions. So if you make drastic decisions and sell out of a position, or, try to chase the next big meme stock, or, something to try and speed up the process, if you try to overcompensate basically and try to get back what you've lost, kind of a gambler's mentality, this strategy is going to be really tough. So there's a lot of pitfalls. If you're not good with your expenses, if you're kind of an impulse buyer, you like to gamble a lot, you just like to spend a lot, my biggest issue is my wife, trying to control her spending. She has expensive taste, so sometimes I have to reel her in a little bit. Um, I pretty much have control of the finances. She fully trusts me. We do updates and things like that every month, but and I go over everything with her, but she kind of keeps her hands out of it for the most part and doesn't really want to be that involved in it. So I just kind of have to reel her in sometimes. But again, this strategy has given me the confidence to kind of let loose a little bit more, especially since having a daughter, being able to give her a lot, already more of the things that I never had as a kid, in such a short time frame has been amazing. Um, but again, this strategy it can be very, very risky. So, at Schwab, who I'm with, the margin maintenance requirement is 30%. So if let's say I get down to that 60% mark and I'm now at 60% margin equity and we have a 30% market drop, which could happen, right? We've had a few of them over the years since 2000. Then I'm now going to get a margin call and I have to make decisions. I'm not really worried about it, but there are people that won't be able to deal with it or don't even know what a margin call is. So you need to really, really look at what all of this entails and understand it before you dive in. Um, and like I said, starting slow is my best recommendation. So if you're going to run this strategy, it's starting with a very, very small bill. Start depositing your income, getting used to it, getting used to seeing that margin balance grow and things like that. There's When I started day trading, it was actually recommended that I paper trade, fake money for 2 years before you ever jump in and mess with real money. And there's just a mental aspect to it that you need to learn, and the only way you get that is by doing it. And doing it very slow is my opinion and how it worked for me, one of the better ways to do it. So there's a lot of things you need to make sure you've got your head wrapped around this before you decide to jump in. So not to like scare anybody away, I still think this is the strategy for most people, but there are people out there that this just may not work for, unless you put in the effort and really understand it and get a grip on some of the mental things that you need to get your head wrapped around. And I was one of them. I took like 3-4 months, which I thought wasn't that much time. It might take some people longer before I fully jumped into this. I was just using my mortgage at first. So I was just paying my mortgage out of the account, which is very large, right? My mortgage is very high. But I would definitely recommend starting very small. I'd recommend making sure you understand this, what a margin balance is, margin equity percentage, margin call, all of that stuff before you decide to jump in. And of course, do your research, understand what you're investing in. Try not to follow anybody just because they are investing in it. And I think that this can work for most people. But I just wanted to be kind of blunt about it, and that it may not be for everybody, and it's not all just glamorous. We could be due for a market drop like everybody talks about. We could do for a correction, a crash, you name it. And I plan to show all of that here if that happens, but I'm comfortable with it and I almost expect it. And if it happens in the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years, then I will handle it accordingly. And I have things in place to handle it accordingly. So without rambling anymore, if you guys have any other questions that you'd like to see in addition to this or comments, feel free to put them in the comments of this video and I can do another video like this. You can also jump into Discord and ask me some stuff there, completely free. All of my resources will be down in the description and also the comments. Thank you guys for listening to me ramble here. And let me know if you guys want to see anything different in regards to these questions.